All right, everybody, it is 12 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. So just want to say thank you to everyone who is attending here today. Really, really appreciate it. Excited to learn more about the Department of Natural Resources, the Division of Public Safety and Resource Protection. We have John with us here today. There will be a registration link that I will post periodically throughout the session. That is what will officially track your attendance of this event. So if you are getting credit for attending today's session, be sure you do complete that registration form. And again, I will remind you and post it in the chat throughout today's session. Today's session is being recorded, and on the screen here, you should be able to see the official website for our UW treks. You will be able to watch this recording by at least next Monday. So we'll get it all processed and up there on the website for you next week. And there you can also catch previous treks that maybe you have missed from this year. We've only had one so far here in 2022, but you can check our previous semester's treks out there as well. So again, the UW system trek is a system-wide initiative. When COVID hit in 2020, the 13 schools got together and decided this would be a great way to continue engagement across all of the schools when we weren't able to go and do those in-person visits. So we've been hosting virtually since 2020. So this is our second year. We have 13 treks per semester. Each one is hosted by a different UW school. This was an initiative that was very well supported by President Tommy Thompson. I will tell you about next week's trek. Will be hosted by UW Stevens Point, and Century will be the employer that is featured next week. Again, don't forget to complete the registration form. Again, I'll continue to post that in the chat throughout today's session. And I also have a poll that I'm going to launch here for you. Now, if the poll doesn't show up for you, it might be because you don't have the most updated version of Zoom downloaded. This is just for us to get an idea of who is all here today. So if you can see that, please go ahead and complete the poll. I'll leave it up here for a minute or so to give those time to complete. As well for today, if you have any questions, there will be time for questions at the end. You will submit your questions via the chat feature, and I will read those questions out to John, and we can have our discussion that way. So again, questions that you have, please feel free to put those in the chat, and we will get to those after John's presentation. I'm going to leave this poll up here just for a little bit. Actually, it looks like everybody who is in here right now has had time to do that. So I will go ahead and end that poll. Again, as mentioned, next week's trek will be hosted by Stevens Point, featuring Century as the employer. And there, I'm behind on my slide. Sorry about that all, but thank you for completing the poll. Again, don't forget to submit the registration form. The link can be found in the chat there. I'm going to quit sharing my screen and turn things over to John for today's presentation. Thank you for being here, John.
Great, thank you for having me. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I apologize. The lights in this office are automated, so at some point they're going to turn themselves off. So don't be alarmed. But I am giving this presentation on my phone, and so I'm going to run the PowerPoint through my phone. I'm just going to pull it up here and share my screen. But good to meet everybody. I'm a UW graduate myself, so it's good to have all of you here. I'm always happy to talk to people that share that connection. So let me share my screen. I will do that right now. Okay, can everyone see that presentation?
Yes, I can see it, John.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I'll jump into things, and certainly we'll take questions towards the end there, and I'll try to keep it succinct. So I like to introduce myself first. I'm John Sinclair. I grew up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and I grew up, as kind of a city boy, to be honest. I grew up in a fairly big community. I enjoyed the outdoors. I enjoyed Lake Michigan, did some fishing, some camping, kayaking, hiking around along the lake shore and things like that. But to be honest, natural resources and the environment, that was never a career path in my world. That was a hobby. That's something you did on the weekends. You went outside. It wasn't something you pursued as a career. And so I frankly took those natural resources for granted, didn't give them much thought as I was growing up, and certainly didn't consider a career in that type of topic. So I ended up going to college at UW-Madison. I came in as a pre-engineering major, not really knowing what I wanted to do with myself in college. And after about the first semester or two, I realized I could certainly handle engineering, but it wasn't very fulfilling to me. It wasn't what I saw myself doing, and I didn't feel like that would be the best use of my skills. So I started thinking about some other options, and I had always been interested in law enforcement, interested in the legal system, maybe interested in being a lawyer, who knows? Just ideas I had rolled around in my head. So I ended up getting a minor or a certificate in criminal justice. But as far as majors, I ended up double majoring in journalism and communications while I was at UW. And I figured if I could communicate effectively, if I could write well, if I could speak well, if I could give presentations, those are skills that are pretty critical in a lot of different career paths. And I wanted to be well-rounded. I didn't want to pigeonhole myself and limit what jobs I might be, qualified for down the road. So I thought communication skills, that would be great. Should probably develop those. So I did that in school, tried a couple different internships that were all very different from each other. I didn't stick on a very clear path. I just tried different things. And frankly, I don't regret it one bit. Right after college, I joined Americorps, which is kind of like the US version of the Peace Corps, if you haven't heard of it. So you're essentially a professional volunteer, and you join a program that has a specific focus. So I joined Americorps St. Louis. I moved down to St. Louis the week after I graduated from UW. I hate humidity, so I don't know what I was thinking. And I didn't know anyone in St. Louis, but I did it, and I can honestly say it was the best choice, best experience of my life. It changed the trajectory of my life. So I joined this Americorps program, again, based out of St. Louis, but the work that we did was all over the nation. So our focus was on conservation work and on conservation work and on natural disaster response. So it was kind of a really like boots on the ground, get your hands dirty, do the real work that needs to be done, kind of an opportunity. And so I didn't have a background in that, right? I was a journalism major. But we spent time building trails, working with the U.S. Forest Service, working with different DNRs from different states, doing invasive species removal, kind of that entry level hard work that goes along with conservation. And then the other half of what we did was that natural disaster response. And that was where after a tornado or an ice storm or a flood came through a community, kind of anywhere in the South or the Midwest part of the country, we would generally be there within a day or two in the aftermath of that disaster. And that was eye-opening for me. I did not see that as, I was a hero or that I was coming in and going to save the day with my journalism degree. These were people that were going through true struggle, true catastrophe in their lives. Maybe they had just lost their home, they had just lost loved ones or pets. Their whole life was destroyed by a natural disaster. And I was basically a college kid thrust into that, and people were looking to me as if I was going to help make it better. And what I realized was, in many ways, that community or those communities were teaching me about the realities of life. Right? I grew up in my bubble. I grew up in Kenosha, and then I went to school in Madison, but Wisconsin was kind of my bubble. This got me out. It showed me the way people live all across the country, the challenges they face, the cultures that they have, and it was life-changing. So that might sound a little dramatic, but frankly, it's my honest opinion about that experience. And what I can tell you is that changed the trajectory of my career aspirations, because suddenly I was thinking, okay, you know what? Natural resources are pretty interesting. I've gotten some work experience in the natural resources field, even if it's kind of entry level, boots on the ground work. And you know what? I really like helping people. I really like public service, helping people in disaster, helping people in crisis, trying to solve issues, and work as part of a team. I really enjoy that. And those were things I didn't fully understand about myself when I was in school. So I came back. I'm moving back to Wisconsin. I'm going to go find my dream job, right? I got done with Americorps. And lo and behold, I didn't find any job. I actually had to move home with my parents for about 3 weeks because I couldn't find a job and I couldn't afford to rent an apartment if I didn't have a job. So luckily, it only took about 3 weeks. I found a job working at a hotel in Madison. Had nothing to do with my career interests, was not my passion. I was like, this isn't even a good resume builder. Well, actually it is, right? I want all of you to think as the opportunities, the things that you've done in your life. I encourage you to not regret any of them, because every piece of what you've done, whether it's work or volunteering, sorry, my phone fell asleep here, whether it's work or volunteering or anything in between, there's value to that. That's changed who you are, that's impacted who you are. And you can use that as a selling point as you go out there and market yourself looking for careers. So
John, you'll need to reshare your screen.
Oh, sorry, I have it up on
That's
mine.
okay.
I thought it was still up on yours. And so let's see here. Let's bring it back. Okay. Here we go. So I then went on to work for the UW system in alumni relations for about a year. And then I found out that I had a friend who worked for the Department of Natural Resources in Wisconsin. I actually didn't even know he did that, but it kind of stumbled across my lap that a buddy of mine worked for the Department of Natural Resources. So I started asking him about what he did for work. And he was a conservation warden or a law enforcement officer for the DNR. I ended up job shadowing him for a few days while he was working, and I was like, this is very interesting, this is kind of cool. And it combines those things that I developed passions for when I was in Americorps, and I should probably pursue this career. I should give it a try and see if the DNR will hire a journalism major to do anything for that. I didn't have high hopes, but I figured it was worth a try. Well, lo and behold, after I made it through their hiring process, they made me a job offer, and I've now been a conservation warden for about 10 years with the DNR. And it's been a great career. I still feel like I just started yesterday, and I love it. And I love the people I get to work with, both internally and in the community. And I like feeling like the kind of the collective work that we're doing as an agency is having a positive impact on Wisconsin and frankly, all over the nation. So you might ask, well, what is the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and what is it all about? And what does a conservation warden do? There's many people that haven't really heard of conservation wardens or don't know much about it. So here's what I can tell you. The Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is a big state agency, right? It serves all people of Wisconsin, all the visitors to Wisconsin. It enforces rules and puts into place management practices and research that is meant to protect all natural resource related things in Wisconsin. So our natural world, the environment, the air, the land, the water, the fish and wildlife that inhabit it, our state recreational properties like state parks, state trails, state forests, and our outdoor safety related topics as well. So the DNR is really involved in a little bit of everything. We have about 2,500 full-time staff at the DNR that work all over the state. But out of those 2,500 full-time staff, we have researchers, we have biologists, HR staff, customer service staff, maintenance staff, just about anything you can think of. We have positions that do that at the DNR. But about 10% of our 2,500 staff work in our division of public safety and resource protection. So that's kind of like our law enforcement team. So it's a small subset of the bigger DNR. We have about 225 conservation wardens that look like me, right? And not necessarily look like me, but they wear a uniform like I do. And they are kind of the visible law enforcement presence in the DNR. They work all over the state, and they enforce a wide variety of laws that relate to natural resources and outdoor safety. So I'll get into what conservation wardens do in just a bit, but I want to just touch on some of the other roles that exist within our division. So it's things that you might consider down the road if you're looking into careers or even like an internship or part-time opportunity as well. I'll just touch on these. So separate from conservation wardens like myself, we also have special investigative wardens. And that is essentially like our DNR detective. So they still carry police equipment. They go through the same law enforcement training that I do, but they typically wear plain clothes. They're kind of like the detectives you see on TV or in real life. And they're conducting our more complex investigations that involve the commercialization of natural resources like commercial fishing on the Great Lakes. And they investigate more in-depth environmental contamination cases where perhaps we have a company dumping lead battery acid into a river because they don't want to spend the money to properly dispose of that hazardous waste. And that's a real example of a case that one of our special investigative wardens worked on, was something to that level where they're contaminating water, impacting fish species, impacting aquatic vegetation, impacting public drinking water. Those are the kind of cases that we get involved in at the DNR. So if you think, oh, this is the guy that checks fishing licenses all day, that's not an accurate representation of what we do as conservation wardens. I realize my screen just popped off. I'll bring it back up again. But that's why I like to come and talk to students and to pretty much anyone that will listen, because I like to share our story and help them understand what we provide, the service we provide to everyone in Wisconsin, and kind of the critical nature of that work. So we have, like I said, our special investigative wardens that get involved in the more complex casework. Those cases might take months or years to build, just like an investigation into maybe something traditional law enforcement related that you think about or you see on TV. We're conducting those same types of investigations, but they're focused on natural resource violations. We also employ about 10 recreation wardens around the state, and they are kind of like our experts on laws that relate to recreational vehicles. So those are boats, all-terrain vehicles, snowmobiles, off-road motorcycles, and things like that. And so we have jurisdiction as the DNR over those vehicles. And so we also have to investigate serious accidents that involve those vehicles. So our recreation wardens are specially trained in accident reconstruction. You think about a serious or a fatal accident occurring between vehicles on the interstate, the state patrol is probably going to be there investigating. Well, when two boats collide on a lake or on a river and someone's seriously injured or worse, we are typically the primary investigators of that recreational vehicle accident. So our recreation wardens help us because they have some specialized accident reconstruction equipment and skill sets to do that work. They also do a lot of community education as well to help people learn how to do things the safe way. The next opportunity within our law enforcement team is the environmental enforcement specialist. And we have about 10 of these people on our team spread across the state. And they are not law enforcement officers, so they're not wardens. They don't have a badge. They don't carry police equipment. They don't go through law enforcement training. But they are kind of like our civilian investigators. So they are still actively involved in environmental investigations and compliance. They primarily focus on businesses. So making sure businesses around the state are complying with environmental permit requirements, that they're not contaminating the environment in an illegal way, etc. So our environmental enforcement specialists are kind of, again, like our civilian investigators. So they still get to do some pretty interesting and critical work, but they aren't the ones carrying the badge and the gun, essentially. We work cooperatively with them all the time. And we really rely on them because they carry kind of an extra level of education and understanding of our environmental regulations, which, as you might imagine, can be pretty complex when you're regulating air quality, water quality, soil quality, things like that. And then lastly, we just this year are launching our community service officer seasonal position. So this is a summer job. It can be taken as a paid internship, and it's a brand new program. So we're still kind of building it out, figuring out exactly how it's going to work. But essentially, it's meant for people really from any background, certainly college students, but also could be people at different stages in their lives who are looking for some seasonal summertime work. It's essentially a full-time summer job, but it only exists during the summer. So you won't be employed in the spring. You won't be employed in the fall. You'll just be employed 40 hours per week for that summer season. And those positions exist all over the state. And they'll be doing a wide variety of work with us. They'll work side by side with people like me, like conservation wardens on some of our cases. They will do some basic security work at some of our state properties, like making sure buildings are locked up, talking to people who are breaking, low-level laws, like maybe they're walking a dog off a leash, or they're transporting invasive species on their boat trailer at the boat launch. So there's going to be some compliance type work, security type work, and then some community outreach and education work. So educating people on the correct way to do things and how to abide by natural resource regulations that exist. So I frankly think it's a pretty cool opportunity. I wish I had had that opportunity when I was in your shoes when I was growing up. Unfortunately, the hiring process for those positions has already closed. It closed at the end of, late January. So I apologize that I'm not able to talk to you about that while the hiring process is still open, but that's something you may want to consider if you're looking for opportunities in the in the future. You don't have to be a current college student to be a community service officer. So that position could be an opportunity for you down the road. We'll start hiring for the 2023 summer community service officer positions this coming December. So if you're interested in a summer job for next year, for 2023, you want to look at our job opportunities starting in December of this year, because that's when you should be able to submit an application. So moving on, and I touched on a few of these things, but conservation wardens and investigative wardens, what do they do? What laws do they enforce? We're very much a lesser known law enforcement agency. I could tell you, like I mentioned before, a lot of people would look at me and if they know who I am, they'll probably say, well, he checks fishing licenses all day. And what I can tell you is you probably don't need a college degree to check a fishing license, right? It's fairly easy, fairly straightforward. And I can tell you is that's really on the low, simple, easy end of what we do as conservation wardens. But we also get involved in so much more than that. And I'll explain to you. We enforce all fish and wildlife protection laws. So laws that protect fish and wildlife, laws that protect endangered species, laws that protect, just kind of anything relating to fish and wildlife. We also enforce all laws that protect environmental, or protect the environment, I should say. So we've talked about that: clean air, clean land, clean water, and so on. We enforce the laws that protect those things. Those are obviously critical topics, right? Everybody needs clean air. Everyone needs clean water. We don't just work for the hunting and fishing community, we work for everybody in Wisconsin, and the work that we do impacts everyone in Wisconsin. And like I mentioned, we also enforce recreational vehicle laws, so boating laws, all-terrain vehicle laws, snowmobile laws. We're involved in all those activities. And then our conservation wardens, like myself, do also enforce kind of traditional laws on state lands, at state parks, state forests, state trails. So a conservation warden, like what I do, is not a park ranger. We work all over the state on all public and private lands. So I work all over the place. Might be an environmental issue in someone's backyard, or it could be an illegal campsite at a state park, or somewhere out on Lake Michigan. There's illegal fishing going on. We might be out there working that. So our job really takes us to every corner of the state, including our state parks and state forests. So we do some more traditional law enforcement work there. We do all conservation wardens all wear uniforms. We carry the same exact equipment that your average police officer or state trooper or sheriff's deputy would carry. And like I said, we do check people's fishing licenses, but we also get involved in very complex casework. So you might be checking someone's fishing license in the morning. You might be doing a presentation for college students at noon. At 1 o'clock, you might arrest someone who's drunk driving a boat down a river. And at midnight, you might get a phone call about a truck full of gasoline that tipped over into a river, and now you have 8,000 gallons of gasoline that is draining into a public waterway. And so that's the wide variety of casework that we get involved in and that we respond to. So it's much more than what some people, I think, imagine it is that we do. We do covert investigations, much like you'd see on TV, investigators working undercover to, uncover traditional, law violations. Well, we're using covert investigations, undercover staff to go in and conduct natural resource investigations. So the tools that we have at our disposal are the same as the tools that a traditional law enforcement agency has. So we use search warrants and subpoenas and work through the criminal justice system just like any other law enforcement agency. We use those tools to investigate natural resource and public safety violations. We are also trained in environmental sampling. So we all carry sampling kits in our patrol vehicles. So when there is that gasoline spill, when there is a violation of manure spreading on a farm, we may be the ones going out and sampling that soil, sampling that water, and then working with the state laboratory to analyze what is in that sample, so we can start to build our case about whatever contamination might be taking place. Now, again, I'm a journalism major, right? I'm not a soil scientist. I'm not a fisheries biologist, and so I have to work with other experts at the DNR to build those cases. We don't expect you to be the expert on all these things. We're going to teach you a lot about it, but you're going to always have the backing of our biologists, our scientists, our environmental enforcement staff, et cetera. So the DNR is really a collaborative effort, right? We work collaboratively with all the different people at the DNR so that we can do our job effectively. So I've touched on the environmental protection piece of things quite a bit. I don't know that I need to elaborate a lot more on this slide, but it is a critical piece of what we do. Once the environment is damaged, it's difficult to fix it, right? It's not like writing someone a ticket will clean that stream or will uncontaminate that soil. It's more complicated than that when someone does something bad to the environment. So we work through the criminal justice system to try and get restitution or to try and force people to do the cleanup work or pay for the cleanup work themselves. And that's an imperfect process, but it's more than just writing tickets and walking away. This type of law enforcement is a little bit more involved. We have to see things through to the end and work with a lot of different people and moving parts on these cases to make sure things are cleaned up or handled properly. Like I mentioned, kind of that traditional work, when some people think of conservation wardens, they think, well, hunting and fishing and trapping and wildlife. And we absolutely do get involved in those topics. We're ensuring the sustainable, ethical, and safe use of our natural resources. So hunting and fishing are popular pastimes in Wisconsin. So we absolutely enforce laws that protect hunters and anglers, that protect the fish and the animals. And we do also on occasion help injured wildlife as well. So we are not a wildlife ambulance service by any means, because we sometimes have to let nature take its course, but certainly for unique species or protected or endangered species, we may come out and try and rescue that animal and get it to a wildlife rehabilitator if it can be saved, or receive some veterinary help. So we do, that work changes with the seasons. The hunting enforcement that we do is typically a fall and winter activity. We don't really do as much hunting enforcement in the spring and the summer because those seasons aren't generally going on. Fishing enforcement is kind of a year-round thing. And so our job just has a lot of variety and really changes with the season. I touched on recreational vehicle enforcement. We're enforcing safety laws on recreational vehicles. Do you have the life jackets you need? Do you have the safety certification? Are you wearing your helmet? Things like that. Are you spreading invasive species? Someone might take their boat to Lake Michigan and collect a bunch of invasive zebra mussels in their bilge water. And then they might take that boat to a lake in western Wisconsin and pump out their bilge, and suddenly they've introduced an exotic invasive species into a lake that otherwise didn't have that. Well, that's illegal, as you might imagine, and we enforce laws related to that, the spread of invasive species. We also, as I mentioned, investigate boating and other recreational vehicle accidents. When someone's injured or killed, we're typically the lead investigative agency on those cases. And then because we have so much unique equipment, boats and all-terrain vehicles and snowmobiles, we get involved in a lot of search and rescue incidents. So we'll work cooperatively with local fire departments, local police departments, et cetera, to help them with search and rescue activities. And that could be in the middle of nowhere in rural Wisconsin, or it could be in Milwaukee, could be in Kenosha or Madison. The work that we do really takes us literally everywhere. We work in the big cities and we work in the rural counties. We're everywhere in Wisconsin, and we're here to serve everyone in Wisconsin. I touched on state lands enforcement. So Wisconsin used to have park rangers, and I think everyone on this call probably has an image of a park ranger in their head, right? It's someone with a big hat that works at a state park or a national park, and they enforce laws and they do educational things, and Smokey the Bear hangs out with them maybe. In Wisconsin a few years ago, we restructured how our park ranger program worked. So our park rangers in Wisconsin are no longer actual law enforcement officers. They don't carry a badge. They don't have any police equipment. They don't have any police training. They are kind of they're kind of like educators and security, so to speak. But because we phased out the law enforcement park ranger positions, we added more positions to our conservation warden program. So now you see someone like myself or my coworkers will provide that law enforcement presence at state parks and state forests. So that's a change. It is, it's part of what we do. It is not all of what we do as conservation wardens, but in the summertime, during kind of that busy state parks camping season, we will spend more time in our state parks where we enforce really any law that any officer enforces. Might be a speeding violation, drunk driving, illegal camping, drug usage, might be someone who broke their ankle on a hiking trail at a state park, and we're the first responder going out to check on them and help get them out of there. And so kind of just a wide variety of services we provide at state properties. And again, that's not all of what we do. It's a one piece of what we do as conservation wardens.
John, will you share your screen again, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was. Okay.
It's okay.
Sorry about that. The phone is a finicky device here. 1 second. There we go. So this was the state lands enforcement slide. And just touching on one other thing that I actually didn't even understand until I came to the DNR. Another set of laws that we enforce as conservation wardens is actually forestry laws. So some may not be surprised, others may be, but timber theft, so the theft of forest products, is alive and well in Wisconsin. People will go onto other people's property, cut down valuable trees, and sell that wood for a profit illegally. They're stealing the wood off of someone else's property. So as conservation wardens, we actually generally have authority over investigating those violations, and those can be serious criminal violations, right? They might be stealing tens of thousands of dollars in trees and timber. And so our conservation wardens all over the state are involved in those types of investigations as well. And again, I couldn't have even told you that was a thing when I was growing up in Kenosha, Wisconsin, but it is very much a thing. And we investigate cases like that even close to the Madison area, which is where I work. So you never know when things like that are going to pop up. And just another example of kind of the wide variety of duties we get involved in as wardens. And I guess kind of closing things up here, education and outreach is a huge part of what we do. So just because I wear a badge and a uniform and carry police equipment and a gun doesn't mean I am out there to just get people in trouble all the time. In fact, something we expect of every single conservation warden is that they get involved in their communities. Each one of us is like our own community officer or community warden. We need to attend events, educate people, answer questions, participate in community cleanup events, river cleanup events, hunting education opportunities, snowmobile safety, hunter safety classes, boating safety classes, etc. It's our job as conservation wardens to be ambassadors for the DNR and to kind of encourage people to not take natural resources for granted. Like, we want to help them understand, like, these resources, that clean air and clean water, that's valuable. That's important. That's worth protecting. And we want them to understand the laws that apply to that sort of stuff as well, because I would rather teach someone the right way the first time than have them make the mistake and for me to catch them after the fact and get them in trouble. I'd rather educate them and have them not make that mistake to begin with, right? So our community outreach and education is a very critical component of every conservation warden career as well. And I enjoy that. You can probably tell at this point I like to talk. And I certainly enjoy our education and outreach. Yeah. So you've probably picked up on this by now as I've gone through the presentation, but what are some of the benefits of a career in natural resources law enforcement? Well, for me, I think working in a public safety and public health related career is really rewarding. It was never my goal to work in the private sector. I always wanted to work in the public sector. I thought that, my goal in life wasn't to get rich. It was to do something that was meaningful to me and certainly hopefully to earn a fair paycheck. But I want to do something I could feel good about. And I certainly have found that here at the DNR. I really like the collaborative work environment that I mentioned to all of you. I get to work with so many people at the DNR with so many different backgrounds, and I'm constantly learning from them because I may be kind of an expert when it comes to the criminal justice system and the laws on the books and things like that. But I'm going to need the help of our fisheries biologist or one of the scientists at the DNR, et cetera, because they're going to have a background in topics that I know very little about, and I'm not going to be able to effectively do my job unless they help me or that I help them, vice versa. So I like that collaborative work environment, but I still get a lot of independence as well. I generally get to kind of make my own schedule. I can adjust my hours throughout the day. Sometimes I'm working in the early morning, sometimes I'm working late into the night. And so I have a lot of schedule flexibility, and I get to work independently a lot. So my supervisor works in a different county than I do. They're not looking over my shoulder every second of every day. I just have to prove to them that I can work independently and be trusted and be efficient and prioritize my time. And so the career is really unique in that way, that you get a lot of control over the work that you're doing. And you get a lot of trust, and you have to be able to work independently and self-direct your work activities. But if you're someone who can do that, you can find a lot of freedom in a job like this. I've certainly given you many examples of the variety of work we get to do. You are never going to get bored in this career. Everything I do changes on a day-to-day basis. You never know what's going to pop up, the weird phone calls that are going to come in, the cases that are happening. And so it's a career that we will always be learning in and that you'll never be bored in. I think that's important for me, at least. I talked about the flexibility and The flexibility is very unique. We do tell you, you do have to work every other weekend as a conservation warden. So you get, 2 weekends off a month typically, and then you're working 2 weekends a month, but you always get 2 total days off per week. And on the days that you are scheduled to work, like I mentioned, you get to kind of choose your schedule most of the time. You get to decide when to start your day, when to stop your day, etc. Maybe one day I'm going to work a 12-hour shift because it's a really busy day and there's a lot going on. Well, the next day, maybe I'll work a 4-hour shift because I can flex some of that time off because I worked such a long day the day before. And I get that flexibility as a conservation warden. I really like that. And then lastly, and we touched on this, fulfillment. We're all of us, you and myself included, we're going to be working for a while, probably. So why not have it be a job that you find rewarding and challenging and enjoyable? Whether or not you want to be a conservation warden, that's totally up to you. But what I'm telling you is this is certainly worth your consideration. If I touched on some things that have really gotten your attention, I want to talk to you about this more. I want to be a resource to you and help you understand our program and what we offer. We don't require you to have any previous law enforcement experience. There's no specific degree requirement, so it doesn't matter what you study. We would hire you as a conservation warden, and we will put you through our own paid training academy to get you to become a certified law enforcement officer in Wisconsin. So we will train you on some of those hard skills, but what we're really looking for is people with the soft skills, the passion, the ability to talk to people, different than themselves, and the problem solvers and creative thinkers out there. We need really good independent thinkers, as well as people that can work well in a team setting. So that's who we're looking for. We can train you on some of those other skills. We can train you how to drive a boat or an all-terrain vehicle. So don't be intimidated if you haven't done some of the things that I talked about or that you haven't studied them. Again, I was a journalism major in college, right? So I have a big learning curve, but we got some great instructors here, some great mentors at the DNR, and we're here to help you be successful. So that was my long-winded presentation. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Hopefully it wasn't too distracting. This is my contact information. That's my phone number, my email. You're welcome to call, text, email me anytime. Could be today, it could be a year from now. It doesn't matter. I work as a conservation warden, so I have my day job, but I'm also very much involved in our recruitment and outreach efforts. So I have generally know the answers about questions relating to the hiring process, application process, et cetera, training process. So I just want to be a resource to any one of you that has questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. I was impressed you did all that from your phone. I struggle doing this on my computer, so it was great. We do have a couple questions. And so one of the first ones is, were you originally a ranger before Wisconsin made the switch to rangers and wardens, or what did that transition look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So no, I was not. We always had conservation wardens in Wisconsin. So rangers and conservation wardens just existed together. Rangers worked in state parks, conservation wardens worked everywhere else, basically. Once we kind of eliminated the ranger position, conservation wardens took over all law enforcement responsibilities on all public and private lands in Wisconsin. So no, I was never a park ranger, although we certainly did have people that were park rangers that kind of laterally transferred into the warden position. So that did happen. Some rangers chose to stay rangers, but they lost their law enforcement credentials. So they no longer carry a badge or a gun or, continue their law enforcement training. So it played out in a couple different ways. I'll be honest, it wasn't an easy transition. We had people that really wanted to be law enforcement rangers, people that really wanted to be conservation wardens, and then we kind of combined the two positions. And that was a difficult time because people had their kind of dream job, and the state made some decisions that kind of changed what those job descriptions were. So it's something we've been working through. We certainly want to continue to optimize that, kind of our staffing and our training. But yeah, we definitely have brought people from the park ranger position into the warden position. But now those are two very separate things. So we've kind of moved past that, and they're just kind of as they are now.
All right, next question. What is the best way to look for jobs within the DNR?
Yeah, that's a good question. So The best way is to use our state hiring website. And so any state job in Wisconsin, or just about any state job in Wisconsin, has to be applied for through wisc.jobs. Like that's the website name, wisc, WISC.jobs. And that is where every state job, full-time and part-time, are posted. And so what I would recommend you do, any one of you, and this is what I did back when I was looking for jobs. If you go into wisc.jobs, you can set up an account, enter some of your information, set up an account. And I believe you can set it so that it will email you an auto notification anytime the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources is hiring for any job. And the DNR hires for lots of different jobs, so you'll probably get a lot of emails. But if you're interested in something at the Department of Natural Resources, I would encourage you, create a profile on wisc.jobs and then set a notification so that anytime the DNR is hiring, you get an automated email letting you know, because then you can go into that job posting, look at the position description, etc., and see if it's the right fit for you.
Great advice using those job agents. I was wondering how much of your position involves any animal handling or even addressing potentially dangerous animal situations.
Sure. So that varies a lot. So I would say it is a somewhat small part of our job dealing with dangerous animals, but on occasion we have to get involved in, riskier wildlife issues. Now, there are not many animals in Wisconsin that are particularly threatening to humans. Obviously we have wolves in Wisconsin, we have elk in Wisconsin, which can be dangerous. Even deer can be dangerous to people. And we have coyotes, any number of things. Occasionally we have mountain lions that come through the state. I'm not aware of any documented attacks on humans by any one of those animals in Wisconsin, at least not in the recent past. So that is unusual, but people still get very afraid, right? They see something unusual in their backyard, or an animal enters their house that they find, scary to them. Sometimes we get called for that. Our job is not removing raccoons from people's attics. We don't deal with that. They have to hire an animal removal person to come and deal with that. But on occasion, we'll get involved if, we've had deer that get stuck inside buildings. They break through a glass door and a deer is in someone's living room. We're probably going to help with that. And some of our biologists do have tranquilizer guns, so we can sedate animals if we need to. I won't go off in too far of a tangent, but if some of you may or may not have heard, 5 years ago or so, there were several reported sightings of a lion in Milwaukee, as if perhaps someone had it as a pet and let it go. And there was numerous supposed sightings. I can't say that I ever saw it, but we were there with the Milwaukee Police Department trying to figure out if there was a large carnivore wandering some of the drainage ditches in Milwaukee. And so you never know what you might run into. We do help with injured wildlife. We do go in and deal with people who have illegally taken in wildlife as pets, because you can't do that. You can't make a wild rabbit your pet, or a raccoon or something like that. So we got to deal with those issues. But I would say from a dangerous animals perspective, we're certainly involved, but rarely are animals in Wisconsin really a threat to people.
All right, next question. Is there only one training facility within the state? And also, if you were to get an offer, does someone have a say in what part of the state that they will work in?
Those are very good questions. So yes, because we run our own training program, it still meets all the requirements of any law enforcement officer in Wisconsin. So we go through the same general training that any law enforcement officer in Wisconsin goes through. Excuse me. The difference is we pay you as a full-time staff member to go to our academy, which is a great benefit. And then we also teach our own academy. So you're learning this from conservation wardens like me. So you're getting that DNR twist to things. You're not learning it from, Madison police officer who doesn't do conservation warden work. You're getting it from people that actually do that work. So I think we do a really good job of kind of catering or tailoring that training to the work that we do. And then that training generally takes place near Tomah, Wisconsin. So that you're in our training academy for about 5 months. That's when you first get hired. You will be in our training academy for about 5 months, which does seem like a long time, but it goes pretty quickly. And you're kind of like, I'm done with college. Now you're telling me I got to go back to school. I certainly know how that felt. I was living in a dorm room again. but this time I was getting paid to do it. So that was a nice benefit. And you'll be in that academy typically for about 5 months. You'll have to be there during the week. You'll have your weekends off to go home, visit family, see friends, whatever it might be. But that academy does take place near Tomah, Wisconsin, which is kind of northwest of Madison, but not quite to Eau Claire. It's along I-94, so it is kind of a semi-remote location. But you bring your own vehicle, you can leave on the weekends, and you're there with a class of other new staff members as well. Typically, 10 to 15 each year. And then the other piece of that question was locations. So yes, that's a good question. So historically, when we hired conservation wardens, you would not know where in the state you were going to get assigned, like which county you were going to be focusing in, until pretty far along in our training process. So that was not ideal for candidates. That's what I had to do when I applied, and I didn't appreciate that level of uncertainty when I was committing my life to this job. So we've changed that now, and we are doing our best to show you up front, like when you apply for the conservation warden job, which actually we start hiring, our hiring process starts next Monday. So it'll be open for 3 weeks if people are interested in applying. But when you apply, you'll already know what some of the possible locations are, and you can kind of rank, which ones are in your top 3 right off the bat. So we know that's a roadblock for some people. They might be like, well, my family is here, or my spouse is here, whatever it might be. And I totally get that. Having grown up more in the city environment, I didn't want to get stationed up north because that wasn't my world. That wasn't where I knew anyone. I liked the amenities of some of the larger communities I had lived in. I wanted to be in the southern part of the state. So I had that same anxiety. We're trying to move past that so that very early on in the process, you will know where you're going to get stationed. So that should be helpful to people that want to apply. And we typically have some openings throughout the state. It just depends on who's retiring, who's promoted. It changes year to year. But the one benefit of the conservation warden job is that every year we have voluntary lateral transfers. So what that means is, you, as a conservation warden, if someone retires and you want to go and move to their county and take that position, as long as you're the most senior on the list that wants that location, every year of your career you could transfer to a different location in the state if you wanted to. And actually, I did that. I started my career in Kenosha as a warden, and then I laterally transferred voluntarily to Dane County, to the Madison area, because that's where my friends were. That's where I wanted to be. And since then, I've promoted and moved again. And so we will never force you to move or transfer. If you find the spot you want to be, you can stay there the rest of your career. We will never force you. But if you want to, you're always welcome to laterally transfer on a voluntary basis.
Wonderful. All right. I noticed that many jobs posted on the DNR website request specialists in certain divisions. Would you encourage soon-to-be graduates to still apply for these, although we may not be considered specialists?
I don't think it ever hurts. Going through a hiring process is good experience, right? You get to a sense of what questions they might ask in an interview, or at least you kind of see if your resume is competitive, or if, kind of your basic application packet is competitive. You're probably referencing other jobs within the DNR. That doesn't sound like a conservation warden job post. That sounds like, we hire for many different positions. We realize everyone has to start somewhere, right? Not everyone can be a specialist the day they graduate college. And so I don't think it hurts to apply. It all kind of depends probably on how competitive that hiring process is, how many people you're competing against. And it's difficult to know. You won't know how many people you're competing against. So it might be 5, it might be 50. It never hurts to put yourself out there. And I know that it is work to put together an application and submit a resume. I've been there and done that, and I haven't gotten every job I've ever applied for. But I would say it is worth it. If you're interested in a natural resources job, don't shy away from putting in for some of these positions. And the other thing I would mention, and I highly encourage you to do, is for any DNR job posting on WIS.jobs that we talked about, any job posting, there will be a contact email or maybe a phone number for kind of the lead hiring manager for that job. And that's typically going to be like the boss that you would work for if you got hired. Don't hesitate to reach out to them directly before you even submit an application. Talk to them. Like, we're all fairly normal people at the DNR, pretty friendly, and it doesn't hurt to have that conversation ahead of time. In fact, they're going to then probably remember who you are, and they may even learn a little bit about you, and that generally won't hurt you in the hiring process. So do that proactive outreach ahead of time, and maybe they will tell you, you know what, you're not going to be competitive in this process, but hey, I got this other opportunity coming up that you didn't know about, and you're going to want to apply for that. So
that's really great advice. I love that. A question about internships or internship opportunities posted on the same website. If not, how do students find out about internships with the DNR?
So it varies. So we do offer a paid internship program at the DNR that is, it's too complicated to explain, but essentially like the whole state of Wisconsin, almost every state agency in Wisconsin is part of like this paid internship program called the Student Diversity Internship Program, which is like this overarching name for all of these different state agencies that have internships. So those are designed for college students. They're paid internships programs. It's called the Student Diversity Internship Program, but it's not based on the color of your skin or your gender, so anyone can apply for that. So that those do appear on WIS.jobs because they are a paid internship. Unpaid or volunteer opportunities do not appear on WIS.jobs. What I would encourage you to do to find those, and those change year to year and change with the pandemic, depending on what's allowed. But if you go to the DNR's website, you can just Google Wisconsin DNR, or you can type dnr.wisconsin.gov or dnr.wi.gov, sorry. If you go to the DNR's public website, you can just search internships in the DNR search bar that pops up. And there's a page that'll highlight kind of current unpaid and internship and volunteer opportunities. And every year there are some. So that could be a good opportunity.
We're going to take one more question here since we are almost out of time. And that question is, when does training typically start for conservation agents?
That's a great question. So the hiring process to become a conservation warden is kind of lengthy, just like it is for any law enforcement officer. And that's because when someone applies to become a law enforcement officer in Wisconsin, we have to pretty thoroughly make sure that they are a good fit for that job. And by that, I mean, have they made pretty good decisions in their life? Are they financially stable? Are they, do they have an issue with drunk driving in their past, like repeatedly? Not that it's not an automatic disqualifier, but I'm just saying some of the things that could pop up were like, are they a good fit to uphold other people's rights, to treat everyone with respect, to be professional, even in difficult situations? And so that hiring process takes 6 months or so. So hypothetically, let's say next Monday, when we start our application process, you put your application in next Monday. If you are successful in our hiring process, you would start with us full-time in the training academy this coming October. So that's a kind of a time gap, but that can work well for people too. Maybe you're finishing your spring semester and graduating. Maybe you're not graduating until the end of the summer. That's fine. That doesn't conflict with your start date of October of this year. So that is probably the timeline that's going to stay consistent for years to come. So we'll open our hiring process about February each year. And if you're successful, you'll get hired in October of that year full-time. So we only open that hiring once a year. We typically are hiring 10 to 15 new wardens every year.
Wonderful. Well, this was great, John. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. I found this extremely interesting. So thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who is here on the call today, as well as the UW System Trex Committee, who is working together with everybody to put these together. I think it's a really great opportunity. Again, this presentation has been recorded and it will be available to you on the Trex website no later than Monday at noon. So again, thank you so much, John.
Yeah,
it was great to hear from you. And thank you for the great questions, those of you who asked questions today. So thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Take care.